Welcome! This webinar is being sponsored by the TDM Web Academy online business training portal. The TDM Web Academy is a network of sponsoring business partners collaborating to present online training for startup, micro, emerging, and existing small business entrepreneurs, as well as nonprofit organizations seeking greater effectiveness and sustainability. Our sponsoring business partners include North Carolina Entrepreneurial Business Resource Center, QRQ Enterprises Inc., TDM Business Tool Suite, and Virginia Entrepreneurial Business Resource Center. Please note that the design and content materials of this webinar has been developed and copyrighted by TDM Business Tool Suite. Permission is not given to reproduce this webinar for any purpose. The webinar presented today is Z003, Grant Writing Primer. This is one of many webinars that is part of our nonprofit capacity building curriculum, which is designed to provide nonprofit organizations with the tools necessary to increase an organization's sustainability and effectiveness. Today's webinar, Z003, Grant Writing Primer, is an introductory webinar designed to highlight the basics of the grant writing process. Participants taking this webinar will learn the fundamentals of the grant writing process. This will include the essence of a grant and a grant proposal, the grant proposal requirements, and grant writing process. When starting nonprofit organizations, most individuals do not realize that in order to receive funding from those willing to contribute, such as a foundation, government agency, or corporation, they must write a grant proposal, which is a process in itself. Grant writing requires an individual to know the who, what, when, why, how, and where of applying for a grant. In other words, grant writing is a major undertaking and requires an individual to take various steps in order to receive funding. This webinar is an excellent introduction for the nonprofit, startup, or individual interested in wanting to learn the steps required to write an effective grant. Our presentation of the basics of the grant writing process is presented by covering 4 key topics. What is a grant? What is a grant proposal? What are the grant proposal requirements? What is the grant writing process? So let's begin with our first topic. What is a grant? An award of financial assistance, gift, or support from a federal agency, private foundation, corporation, or other entity to an individual or organization is called a grant. This award of financial assistance does not have to be repaid, but must be used for the sole purpose of the grant requirements. Typically, most grants are not awarded to individuals. However, there are a limited amount of grant opportunities that individuals may be able to apply for and receive. For example, funding is available for individuals that are seeking financial assistance to pay for college, conduct research, or study abroad. Individuals may also seek grants for work projects in the cultural arts, especially writers, artists, filmmakers, etc. Other opportunities for individuals to receive a grant are for personal assistance because of a disability or to start a business. Government, foundation, and business grant funding opportunities are generally accessible to nonprofit organizations. These types of opportunities are given to a nonprofit organization for charitable purposes for programs benefiting the public. Such grants usually fall in the categories of, but not limited to, education, health services, human services, arts, cultural activities, and community development. To receive a grant, the individual or organization must submit a request which is called a grant proposal. So, what is a grant proposal? A grant proposal is the request in the form of a written document that describes a project or program for which an individual or organization is seeking funding for. The grant proposal is essentially the business plan for the proposed project. That is, the grant proposal will give a description of who you are, what, how, and when you would like to achieve or provide a project or program, who will benefit, and how much it would cost to implement. Generally speaking, most grant proposals require the same or similar information. In some cases, the funding agency will provide some basic guidelines on the type of information that is required, but for the most part, grant proposal requirements have been standardized. Next, we will provide an overview of the basic grant proposal requirements. Information required in a grant proposal typically includes organization background, The organization background requirement includes information about the organization, such as the mission statement, what the organization does, programs or services, people that benefit from the organization's programs or services, target population, and the track record of the organization as determined by its past performance. Statement of the need or problem statement. This information specifies what situation exists, either a need or problem, that requires a remedy, enhancement, or change for the better. That is, a presentation of a compelling argument of why a project is necessary. The statement of need or problem statement should be substantiated with facts, studies, and statistics that clearly identifies and outlines the need or problem based on credible sources and references. Goals and objectives. The Goals and Objectives section of a grant proposal describes what your organization plans to do to remedy the situation. In other words, what does your organization expect to accomplish, goals, and the measurable results or outcomes you expect to accomplish. Objectives. Well-defined goals and objectives represent results and become the criteria to measure success of the project and show to funders that the situation has been resolved. Project Program Narrative. The project or program narrative section describes the framework required for completion or plan of operation. Information included in this section includes activities, methodology, and key resources or requirements, personnel, materials, and any additional resources needed to implement the project. Timeline. The timeline section provides an explanation of how long it will take to complete the project. The timeline can come in various formats, but all timelines should provide the reviewer a visual version of the start and completion time or date for each activity or process. Evaluation plan. This section provides a description of how to determine whether the goals and objectives have been met. The plan provides a way in which the activities, facts, and justifications are tracked and assessed to ensure that the objectives have been achieved. The plan provides the way in which the activities, facts, and justifications are tracked and assessed to ensure that the objectives have been achieved. Information included in this section includes, but is not limited to, having staff available for conducting the evaluation, measurements of success, data capturing and analysis processes, and proper documentation. Sustainability plan. This section provides a description and/or plan to continue operation beyond the grant timeline, as well as proposed utilization of other resources used to support the project or program. In other words, your organization has to provide a plan of how future funds will be obtained and what other funds have been allocated for this purpose. Project budget. The budget section provides a detailed budget and description. The detailed budget is usually presented in a table format, listing the income and expenses and costs associated with each. The description, also known as the narrative or justification, describes each of the line items specified in the budget. Appendices. The appendices or attachments are recommended for most grant proposals. This section may include, but not limited to, tax-exempt status verification, IRS determination letter, list of Board of Directors members, financial statements, and letters of support. The sections of the grant proposal presented here are common sections. The sections of the proposal and how much information is required depend on what the funder requests. So before preparing a grant proposal, make sure that you understand what the funder wants to see. Next, we will discuss what happens during the grant writing process. Writing a grant is a long process that begins with an idea and continues with various steps before completion. The steps that we will discuss today provide an overview of this grant writing process. These steps are: identify a need. Oftentimes, we are very compassionate about something and move forward on it without determining whether there is an actual need for what we are offering. Sometimes it may be a personal issue that may not require mobilizing an entire community. This is why researching the needs of your potential clients or target population is so important. Define the concept. Next, clearly define the idea that will meet the need that has been identified and determine that this idea will benefit the situation. Research funding sources. Once the need and business concept have been identified or defined, a plan can be put in place to research potential funding sources. It is recommended that you create a list of potential funding sources based on your business concept. Identify funding sources. Take the completed list and identify funding sources that will meet the need. If you're unsure, then it is recommended that you contact the funding source and discuss the project or program with the funder's representative. Review requirements. If there is a match between the funding source and the need, then review the grant application requirements to determine in fact an application can be submitted. It is very important that the eligibility and submission requirements be reviewed and understood, because a lot of time can be wasted if the organization does not meet the eligibility requirements. Research previously funded projects. Your next step is to continue with the research of the previously funded projects by that particular funding source. It is also helpful to contact past grant recipients to gain more knowledge about the funder's requirements. Complete grant application proposal. Using the guidelines in the grant application, prepare a grant proposal. Most funding sources will provide the guidelines and submission date of the proposal. In some instances, grants are submitted through the mail, and some are submitted online. It is recommended that a plan should be put in place to ensure that the grant can be submitted on time. Submit application. Submit the application as specified by the grant application and on the date that the grant is due. Most funding agencies will not accept late grant applications, so if the application is late, it will not be considered for funding. Accept grant award. If the grant has been awarded, some funding agencies have an acceptance process. This could be completing some more documentation or simply making a phone call to accept the grant. Implement project. Conduct activities as identified in the grant proposal. Ensure that the project or program activities are managed, monitored, and tracked appropriately, and that all reports are prepared. Evaluation. Although evaluation is listed as the last step, it is recommended that the program and project be evaluated based on the goals and objectives specified in the grant proposal. Periodic evaluation provides opportunities for funded projects to be improved, ensuring that the requirements are met. Now we will conclude our presentation by recapping what we've discussed. In this presentation, we provided an overview of the grant writing process. We discussed the definition of a grant, which means a non-repayment financial assistance, gift or support from a federal agency, private foundation, corporation, or other entity to an individual or organization. In most cases, a grant proposal must be submitted to receive any type of assistance from a grant. A grant proposal is a request in the form of a written document that describes a project or program for which an individual or organization is seeking funding. Information that is contained in a grant proposal include organization background, statement of need, goals and objectives, project program narrative, timeline, evaluation plan, sustainability plan, project budget, and appendices. Finally, we provided an overview of the grant writing process, which includes identify a need, define the concept, research funding sources, identify funding sources, review requirements, research previously funded projects, complete grant application proposal, submit application, accept grant award, implement project, evaluation. That concludes our presentation on the grant writing primer. Thank you for your participation. This webinar is part of a series of webinars offered as part of our nonprofit capacity building curriculum. For more information about our upcoming webinars, please visit our website at www.tdmwebacademy.com or email us at info@tdmwebacademy.com.